Regulation and market structure. Now, since we have seen what is a price caps, in which we have seen what is price floor and what is price rise. So, here we are going to see what exactly economic efficiencies in a more further way, I would say. So, economic efficiency is not met by simply producing goods at a lower possible cost, but also it provides individual with products and services in the desired quantity, quality, places and with the minimum use of society's scarce resources. Most deviation from the ideal do not impose significant cost on the society. When these deviations are significant, there is need for government regulation. For example, firm may acquire extreme market power, let's say in monopoly, that undertakes deceptive practices, conspire, etc. In the market structure regulation, we have 2-3 things that we are going to see here. That is price regulation using RPI minus index method, merger policy. The third one is regulation price using rate of return method. Let's do one by one. RPI minus X refers to the form of price cap regulation developed in the UK and utilized in many countries. The price automatically adjusts for the previous year's retail price inflation and for expected efficiency improvement. So here RPI stands for RPI price inflation and X stands for expected efficiency improvement. During a given period and time, adjustment formula whenever it is kept in place. Thus, RPI minus X controls prevent regulated companies from increasing their prices or revenue by more than general price inflation as measured by retail price index or RPI less X value determined by the regulator over a period of time. The second one was merger policy. Merger and acquisition expand monopoly power. The Competition Commission of India prohibits anti-competitive agreements, abuse of dominant position by monopolies and regulates mergers and acquisitions, while SEBI inspects the proper implementation of guidelines and rule for merger process. Regulation price using rate of return method. Rate of return regulation is a form of price setting regulation where government determine the price, or you can say the fair price, which is allowed to be charged by a monopoly. The rate of return regulation method basically considers the firm size in order to evaluate a reasonable level of profit from its capital base. If the firm earns more profit compared to its size, the government may enforce price cut or charge a tax. Let's discuss about consumer surplus and a producer surplus. Consumer surplus are also known as buyer surplus. It is economic measure of consumer excess benefit. It is calculated by analyzing the difference between the consumer's willingness to pay for a product and the actual price that they pay. Is also called as an equilibrium price. A surplus occurs when the consumer's willingness to pay for a product is greater than its market price. The point where the demand and supply meet is an equilibrium point. The area above the supply level and below the equilibrium price is called as product surplus, and the area below the demand level and above the equilibrium level is called as a consumer surplus area. Well, a consumer surplus for a product is zero when the demand for the product is perfectly elastic. This is because the consumers are willing to match the price of a product. When demand is perfectly inelastic, consumer surplus is infinite because a change in the price of a product does not affect its demand. This includes products that are basic necessities such as milk, water, etc. Demand curves are usually downward sloping because demand for a product is usually affected by its price. With inelastic demand, consumer surplus is high because the demand is not affected by the change in the price and consumers are willing to pay more for a product. In such an instance, sellers will increase their price to convert the consumer surplus to a producer surplus. Alternatively, with elastic demand, a small change in price will result in a large change in demand. It will result in low consumer surplus as consumers are no longer willing to buy as much of the product or service with the change in the price. There are various assumptions of consumer surplus theory. The first one being utility is measurable unit. The consumer surplus theory suggests the value of utility can be measured under Marshallian economies. Utility can be expressed as numbers. For example, the utility derived from an apple is 15 units. Second one is no substitute available. There is no substitute available for any commodity under consideration. The third one is ceteris paribus. It states that customer taste, preferences, income do not change. I hope you remember this particular word which we have utilized or used when we were discussing chapter 1 and 2. Next one is marginal utility of money remains constant. It states that utility derived from the income of consumer is constant. That is, any change in the money or amount of money a consumer has does not change the amount of utility they derive from it. It is required because without it, money cannot be used to measure utility. The next assumption is law of diminishing marginal utility. I hope you remember what is law of diminishing marginal utility. We have discussed this point exclusively when we were discussing consumer demand analysis. Well, this particular theory holds a great significance in this context as well, as it states that the more a product or service is consumed, the lower the marginal utility is derived from consuming each extra unit. The next assumption is independent marginal utility. The marginal utility derived from a product being consumed is not affected by marginal utility derived from consuming similar goods or services. For example, if you consume orange juice, the utility derived from it is not affected by the utility derived from an apple juice. So, we can conclude by saying that consumer surplus is a good way to measure the value of a product or service and is important tool which is used to or which is used by the government in the Marshallian system of welfare economics to formulate tax policy. It can be used to compare the benefits of two commodities, and it is often used by monopolies when deciding about price to charge for its product. Let's discuss about producer surplus. Producer surplus aggregates all producers' profit generated by selling a particular product at a marketplace. It is a difference between the price offered by the market and the price at which the producer is willing to sell. If the market is at equilibrium, it is a healthy condition for both the consumer and the producer. The producer surplus definition is crucial for studying producers' contribution towards economy. Thus, producer surplus directly measures the company's profit based on the difference between the production cost and the market price. It is not always necessary for every company to earn a surplus. If the market is at equilibrium, it is a healthy condition for both the producer and the consumer. The producer surplus definition is crucial for studying producers' contribution to the economy. There are multiple companies operating in the same industry. Competition regulates the market price of a particular commodity in these type of competitive market scenarios. However, in a monopoly, the producer surplus is the maximum. In the monopoly, a single company becomes the price leader, or a few market leaders sets the price. Consumer have no substitute. Again, whenever producer enjoy huge margins or huge profit margins, it is at the cost of the consumer. The producer surplus definition highlights how a producer is willing to accept a lower price, but market conditions favors them, resulting in high profits. Low product supply and high commodity demand are common causes of manufacturer surplus. This means new entrants can break a monopoly by setting below market price and still make a profit. Let's assume that Rachel manufactures handmade jewelry. The production cost, let's say, is approximately $4 per ornament. Therefore, she decides to sell her product for $9. The market for handmade jewelry rose exponentially and demand was huge. So now the market price has risen to $18. Based on the given rules and given values, let us try to calculate producer surplus. Hence, a producer surplus would be equal to market price minus producer's minimum acceptable price. That is, the market has grown to various folds and now it is at $18. And the earlier was, the price was 4, right? So, $18 minus $4 is equal to $14. Now, if Rachel sold 900 ornaments in a single year, so here the surplus you will calculate by taking into consideration 900 multiplied by $14, that is surplus is equal to $12,600. Rachel earned a manufacturer surplus of $12,600. As a firm retains the benefit of cost reduction under the price cap regulation, it receives dominant efficiency incentive. A price floor encourages a firm to increase their output beyond a consumer's demand. Let's look another example how these things are interrelated. Let's say John owns a small company of cable wires. He manufactures a single wire cable for $4 and is willing to sell the same in the market. Consumers are willing to pay a general market price of $9. Commonly, two price regulations that we have already seen in details are price ceiling and price floor. And hence government uses various methods to regulate these type of monopoly situation, such as the price capping method, mergers acquisition, rate of return method that we have discussed. Now in this particular scenario, what would happen? John's manufacturer surplus is $9 minus $4 is equal to $5. Now if the consumer acceptance has been negative at the same manufacturing cost of $4, it can sold only at $3 now. In such a predicament, John would incur loss. Also the scenario would be considered a consumer surplus. Therefore, the manufacturer surplus equals the difference between the price companies are willing to sell and the price the consumer are willing to pay. In a long run, companies try to reduce the production cost by adopting a cost-cutting measures. So with this, we are summing up this chapter, and in this chapter we have seen basically what is a market failure, in which we have seen that market failure is defined as an inability of a market in allocating the resources efficiently. We have also seen that in a market failure, equilibrium between supply and demand of products are not reached. We have also discussed about price regulation that can be described as a government measure to decide the quantities of commodity to be sold at a specific price both in the retail market and other stages of production process. So with this, we are done with this chapter, that is chapter number 10 on market failures. Thank you.